Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. Social media platforms Facebook, Google, WhatsApp, ShareChat, TikTok and the IAMAI have agreed to voluntary code of ethics to abide by during the Lok Sabha elections 2019, which are set to begin on the 11th of April. The code came into effect on March 20th and will remain in force throughout the elections. Chief Election Commissioner Sunil Arora said although the code is a good beginning, it's essentially a work in making. The general election will see global and Indian social media outlets following the voluntary code on taking down problematic content and bringing transparency in political advertising. Almost a third of India's 900 million voters are active on social media, making this one of the world's biggest ever attempts to monitor internet content. According to the code, companies will have 3 hours to take down objectionable content in the silent period of 48 hours before polling. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the election code and new age media. Joining me on the program today are S.K. Mendiratta, former advisor, Election Commission, Shekhar Iyer, senior journalist, and Jiten, Jain, director, Voyager, Infosec. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Shekhar Iyer, I'd like to begin the program with you. So what are the biggest challenges really in enforcing, the model code of conduct as far as new age media is concerned?
Well, see, unlike the print medium or the broadcast medium as we see now, the social media is so vast, and its penetration is also deeper and wider. Therefore, there is no way of regulating the content because every citizen can be a journalist who can upload anything he wants, and that can get disseminated through various platforms. And the impact can equally be tremendous because there is no way of verifying, whether the content is genuine, whether it is fake, and all the guidelines that are there in the model code of conduct, which particularly relates to the keeping the quality of campaign, keeping the fair play at work, and there are other guidelines which are there. They get very difficult to be enforced because unless elections commission's attention is drawn to a particular violation or a particular errant behavior by an outlet or by the content provider, the election commission no position to constantly monitor it because there is no mechanism with the election commission because which is otherwise actually too busy, too involved in the conduct of elections. And the very fact that it has a mandate to conduct a free and fair election requires its entire poll machinery to completely be observed in that work. And if you consider general election, which has 7 phases, across the country over 543 constituencies, there is very little time election commission has because all the time the election commission sitting in Nirvachan Sadan constantly gets so many queries from parties, from the chief electoral officers, from the returning officers in the districts. There is a hell lot of work going on. Now, these particular things, particular social media, it's very difficult for them to, there is no section there to monitor. And even if you set up a section, how much of monitoring can they do? And where do they get the staff for that? These are very genuine logistical problems. But at the same time, the impact and the growth of the social media is increasing. So there has to be some way we will have to ensure there is a check on what goes in. Of course, today we have seen a Reuters report on social media content, which says that a sizable section of the social media users do not believe the news that is disseminated through the media because they are not sure whether it is genuine, whether it is fake news or a false news. So these are difficult times, because of the very explosion of this media.
Right. That having been said, Mr. Mendiratta, so does the Election Commission really have the bandwidth to deal with something like this?
No, actually, as has been pointed out, Election Commission has some logistical problems. It cannot monitor each and everything which is being said in so many this social media. So whatever is brought to the notice of the commission, or in fact the Election Commission has got in touch with some agencies. They may be feeding some information to them which may require some prompt action, but everything cannot be monitored by the Election Commission, and wherever it is brought and the Election Commission is really concerned, and that is why you must have seen the last 15-20 days, so many meetings have been held by these social media groups and their leaders. So we want to have, actually I may say that we are not against, Election Commission is not against the social media. Social media definitely will play a very important role, but we want them to play a constructive role. We don't want them to feed the people with fake news and then influence their minds in favor of or against a particular individual. If they are very fair, we would welcome them. Only thing is they have to maintain some decorum. They have to, there is a model code of conduct. They have to work within the framework, four corners of that. So if they do that, Election Commission will welcome all their support.
Right. So Jiten Jain, let's look at it from the perspective of the social media platforms now. How easy or difficult is it for them to keep a track on what's happening on their platforms? Because they own it at the end of the day, so shouldn't they also be responsible for what's happening there?
Before coming to that, I want to focus on that bigger problem of why this is, this meetings of Election Commission and social media companies are happening. You see, the prime propeller of this entire discussion and this so-called voluntary code of ethics is because in last 2 years, many of us have been speaking that Indian elections might be influenced by the foreign agencies. Like it happened in US, where Russia has been accused of simply, manipulating the entire narrative of American elections, and it is said by American agencies that they could install a candidate which otherwise would not have won. And there have been investigations. And Russians did try to, their best for doing this by using social media, by giving fake advertisements, by giving paid advertisements, by putting information which is truthful in public domain, which should not have come out in public domain, and that information was obtained from hacking. Sometimes there was information which was put, which was a mixture of truth and lies, which is difficult to verify. So there was a discourse which was manipulated, specifically using social media, because there was a very little risk of attribution. And they could get away. It was a low-cost warfare. Now, these things could have happened in India also because we are, in a hostile neighborhood where China or, Pakistani agencies might try to influence our election, weaken our political discourse. Now, in that perspective, Election Commission realized that a time has come probably for them to have a say in this entire social media discourse, maybe by regulating, maybe by monitoring, maybe by getting people to agree on a voluntary code of ethics. But this realization has come too late, and what they are doing is very little, and I'll tell you why. See, these companies, what does this voluntary code of ethics say? It says that, we will have this voluntary code of ethics put in place for next 2 or 3 months. It is like saying that if any theft happen in front of my eyes, I'll try and stop it for only 3 months. Later on, I am not bothered. Number one. So it proves that they have the capability and they have not been applying this capability for a while. Now, it may cost them additional resources or money, that is another thing, but it is possible to do such stuff, to take down stuff within 3 hours. Second, they have said that if there is anything objectionable which is found and pointed out by the Election Commission, we will remove it within 3 hours. And these guidelines are not legally binding, they are only voluntary. They may or may not remove. And then we have to see that what will Election Commission do in case they are not able to remove. Fourth, they say that in last 48 hours where there is a no campaigning time frame for any political candidate, if any political content is found to be propagated by any candidate, we will remove it again by 3 hours. And the most important thing, they have said that, look, if any political advertisement has to be run on a platform, it has to be pre-approved by the Election Commission. Now, all these 3-4 things will essentially solve 2 problems. One is compliance of model code of conduct as far as electoral expenses are concerned. Because earlier what was happening that, people would put up free proxy hoardings and they will say that humko nahi pata kisne lagaya, and we have only spent 10 lakhs and the actual expenses would have been crores. So Election Commission came out with a very novel way that if I find any hoarding or poster, I will simply add the cost against your name, and every poster or hoarding has to have the name of publisher or the person who is putting up. They brought the same logic to the social media, which is really good. But the challenge here is that 90% advertisement on social media is again proxy advertisements by fan pages, group pages. So advertisements on those pages need not be pre-approved. So that is one lacuna which is there. So I think they might take a suggestion and improve upon it, that no political ad on any official or non-official account, because see how they are deciding what is a political account by the election affidavits, which will be submitted by the candidates.
I think the Election Commission is already very clear.
The last point,
I'll let you complete just to add to what you're saying. I think the Election Commission has already said that this is going to be work in progress, and it's going to be a learn as you go process. So probably all these feedbacks will be taken.
The last very important point, you see, removing content what sort of content? Maybe rumors, or maybe what? Who will decide what is fake news? What is half-truth? What is distortion of history? What is post-truth? What is different narrative? What is, just unverified facts? So we should have really decided that we'll only remove the political fake news, number one, and there has to be some setup to decide that what is fake. Where are the fact verifiers in Election Commission? For that, I think they should have constituted a team of 200 guys, maybe sitting in MHA, so many agencies. If I can quote you 8 tenders of different agencies and ministries which monitor social media for whatever purpose. Similar machinery in the election time could be utilized to aid Election Commission to monitor such content.
Right.
Last point, we are not realizing the graver threat of elections being manipulated by foreign agencies. Those propagandas, those content, they will come in an invisible form. Congress was hacked last year, BJP was hacked this year. We don't know, none of these political parties approached the Delhi police or any agency. We don't know what has gone in. Now suppose, God forbid, if some content comes online during the course of election, which is truthful, but which is damaging, which may destroy the reputations of many candidates, will you allow such things to come in market by foreign agencies? That is not fake news, but we have to figure out, and then if these companies do not cooperate, we have to have another plan B, that we will block them immediately, such URLs, and we will not go that 48 hours route by the monitoring committee. So we have to be forceful, and we have to focus on the bigger problem of elections being manipulated by invisible content.
Sure.
So that is the bigger problem in my opinion.
So problems are plenty, as Jiten Jain is pointing out, Shekhar Iyer, and he's suggesting that, several things need to be done really to put things in place. So what do you think is the best mechanism really to deal with this? How do you believe that, the government should get involved at some point in time, maybe to try and deal with this problem? Do we need some policy level changes? What is it really?
No, I think the problem with this social media is, as Mr. Jain just pointed out, there is no agreement on even what is fake news and what is false news or what is alternative truth. Because what happens is, when somebody says it's fake news, there is an opposite view. No, that is not fake news. That is actually an alternative view. So it's very difficult to define these things. But I think there is another aspect which, it's like regulating even the other media, whether it is print media or anything. You see, a lot of it will depend on the reader discretion, because after all, social media is consumed by a lot of people who are educated, who are literate. They are not the type of voters who would get can be easily confused and who can be misled. Now, this is which is a fairly educated class, but then access to the media is such that any class, whether you are educated, not educated, semi-educated, literate, semi-literate, it doesn't matter, because everybody has an access. So therefore, it's a very difficult proposition. But moment you bring in more regulatory mechanism, you will see the very media outlets will start, saying that our freedoms are under check and so on and so forth. So I think this is a period where perhaps the political parties can also take a call, because where even if a fake news which encourages their case against their opponent, let us say, but they need to get together and say that this must not be done. Let us fight the electoral battle on the basis of agreed, because it can damage one party today, it can damage another party today. Now, the question is, do these parties have that kind of wisdom and foresight to agree that we must not get into all this? So even in the US, we have just seen the Mueller report has come as to how much of influence Russians had the Trump campaign, and whether Trump was a party to allow the Russians. Now that report is neither here nor there. It has concluded that that Trump had nothing to do with it, and it has at the same time not given a clean sheet that he did not obstruct a proper investigation. So even where in a country like America, where probably it is a more homogeneous way of approaching things and it's easier than here, but there also there are difficulties. So I think we will have to ensure there can be perhaps an education or a campaign to educate our users of social media to to exercise discretion in understanding what is being put out, because that's very important.
True.
And of course, there are other websites which often do what is called fact checking. They take up a cause and say, look, this is what was said, this is not there. Even television channels are doing it, calling it viral search. They just take up a thing and find out whether who has done it, who put it out, what is actual fact. These exercises are going on. but often, the damage is done in the first few hours.
Right.
Because then going about correcting is difficult.
It's difficult,
It remains a challenge. Well, but what kind of mechanism should be in place, I think, is for an open debate. And the debate should happen during the non-election times.
Right.
Because not at the time when there are elections.
Right. Yes, Jiten, you wanted to add something.
See, look at the two arguments which have been given by all these private companies that why Election Commission should not have a forceful guideline or in a form of a, official guideline. It should be a voluntary code of ethics. They say that, look, if government starts monitoring content, if they start deciding what is to be removed, then free speech might go for a toss. It is an invasion of our privacy. You see, the biggest right, the fundamental right I as a citizen have is to decide who will rule upon me, who will make laws for me. To protect that nucleus of our constitution, that right to have free and fair elections, right to have a legitimate government, is to protect that free and fair election. I think a small bit of monitoring is always all right. It is no way intruding our piracy, because what Election Commission is trying to monitor is the open source content, what you post on your public walls, on your Twitter feed, which you want others to see. They are not monitoring your private chats on WhatsApp and other conversations. You see, so as long as they are monitoring open source content, these arguments given by this company like ShareChat or Facebook that Election Commission should not get into this business of deciding is all farce, because they don't want you to see what they are actually doing. Second, even see, they are admitting in these guidelines, we will remove when you bring it to our notice, but we will not do it anything ourselves. You see, they are putting the onus on Election Commission, which I think Election Commission has not realized. They have played with the words. Last point, you see, in US, these companies, there is an FBI and they have been, blocking down Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts which influence the American midterm elections. Have they done any such thing in Indian elections? I can point you out 3 studies where Pakistanis made fake accounts, tried to instigate riots in Assam and all those things. Have they done anything in India or like that?
Right.
No. So I think we are still a second-grade country for them. They don't want to invest money in our elections. If all these things like 40 people killed because of rumors, if that happened in US, I'm sure many other measures would have come in.
Yeah.
These people refuse to appear in front of our parliament. That is a testimony of their indifference. They're not ignorant. They're indifferent to our
double standards basically. And
double standards.
Yeah. And that's something that's not
and this
acceptable.
Is what British Parliament said. They are digital dacoits.
Right. That having been said, Mr. Mendiratta, what is it that in the election time, of course, the larger debate will continue as to, how social media platforms need to behave, what needs to be done, what kind of a mechanism we need to have in place. But in the immediate, future now, since the elections are just around the corner, what is it that the Election Commission would expect or would like to see from the social media platforms?
Actually, there is a total vacuum. There is no legal provision, there is no legal sanction for the Election Commission to act in such areas. It's, as we have said, it's only a voluntary code which these social media, they have agreed to adopt for themselves. And I am sure that having once accepted those principles on which there was some agreement, they will stand by those things. And the danger will be only during that last period of 48 hours when the people are just about to go to vote, and then something appears on the social media, and by the time that is taken out, even after the Election Commission, as we have seen, the damage will be done. And as you have referred, this, how many, even those TV channels which we were discussing, how much time, how many efforts they have made to find out whether this is a fake news or this viral such hai ya nahi hai. How much time? Now in the election period, there is no such time. We have to immediately act. And in that case, I would say that they must rely on the Election Commission's judgment.
Yes.
So if the Election Commission feels that this is a objectionable content, it should not appear on the social media, then whatever may be the other considerations, that should be instantly removed.
Right.
So that the damage which may have started, it should be limited in the back.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Quick closing comments from all my guests, starting first with you, Shekhar Iyer. So, is self-regulation then, till we have a proper framework, the best way to deal with this problem?
Well, self-regulation could be a good beginning. And what is more important is intention, because the intention has to be that we shall not seek to influence the elections in any manner that is considered foul. And that intention has to do with any outlets or any platform has to have some basic commitment to the democratic values, because this requires a lot about intention, because my actions may appear to be very normal on board, but if my intentions were to seek to influence elections by some means, that would not augur well for all the parties concerned, because if I can do mischief with one set of parties or one set of candidates, I can do it with others also. Therefore, I think the parties themselves must also realize, because what we see these days is every party, what its name has a IT wing, and all the time they are going about is firing missiles at each other. And in the consequence, you have their supporters also indulging in the same kind of, tit for tat and no holds barred. Now, that kind of battle, that kind of a war cry and a war scenario, is it necessary actually to push your case? Because perhaps there could be a mature way of looking at things. But as I said earlier, the heat of elections is not the time to have even an academic debate on this, because this is beyond anybody's control, because during election time, every party wants to win, every candidate wants to win. But these are the times, as Mendiratta ji, who has spent long years in Rausan Southern, and he has been a great voice of reason and in the commission, he is an institution by himself. So therefore, it is for the election. We will have to look up to the election commission, because these are the institutions which have continued to face several challenges, despite, several generation of CECs and ECs coming and going. So therefore, there has to be some way where we will have to respect our institutions. Right. And parties will also have to respect institution and also the game, because after all, elections are a game. Because Vajpayee ji used to say, parties bante bigarte hain. You see, parties are formed, they go, some survive, some. So there has to be some amount of acceptability as to this fight. These elections are about governance, about choosing members of parliament, about people finding a voice to give vent to whatever they wish to say by choosing the candidates. So some amount of, I would say, less seriousness, right, and allowing room for others to have a fair say is very important.
And trust an institution like the Election Commission is what Mr. Shekhar Iyer is suggesting. Yes, Jiten Jain.
So I want to say that, you see, if a politician or a political party, they breach the spending limit and they end up spending 1 crore on social media undetected, or if they post a content in the last 48 hours and we are not able to remove that, you see, all these problems can be dealt even post facto in the form of election petition and all those. They can be disqualified. There are many ways to deal with that problem. But foreign agencies manipulating your public discourse, destroying your electoral process, and thereby creating a politically structured opinion in the public or influencing an election is a problem of magnanimous proportions. And if any damage happens in that sphere, it will be irreversible. You will not be able to say that, oh, we'll go and have a general election again. So let us not focus on the small battles, look at the bigger war. We will win these battles even post facto, but this bigger problem of Indian elections itself being manipulated by our adversaries is, I think, a bigger threat, and we must focus on that. And whatever we can do to assist Election Commission, and I strongly believe, as Sir rightly pointed out, whatever they decide in their informative judgment should be the final word.
No lives may be lost, but it is still a national security threat is what you're suggesting, and it has to be dealt with in that way. You cannot have external factors have any kind of an influence within the country, and everyone should come on board and ensure that that happens. Please close the show for us with your concluding remarks, Mr. Mendiratta, on the best way forward.
The best way forward is, as we are all enlightened citizens now, it's our responsibility to ensure that we do not become a party even for the dissemination of the fake news. We may just not go on forwarding whatever we receive and simply say forward it. We should see what is our responsibility. We have to see that if something comes to me which is objectionable, I must stop it at least at my level. I should not disseminate it further. Then, as I say, there are certain lacuna in law which of course need to be filled. There is, unfortunately, there is a limit on election expenses of the candidates, but there is no limit on the election expenses of political parties. So, a candidate cannot go beyond a particular prescribed limit. But the political parties may spend as much as they want. Sky is the limit for them. So this is another one. So even if somebody has exceeded the limit and gone far beyond, that is disturbing the level playing field. But that is the bane of our society. We have been fighting for this limit to be imposed, some limit to be imposed on the political parties' expenses also for I think for nearly more than 2 decades. But law making is not in our hands.
Right. Right. All right. So what's coming out of this debate is till the time we have a mechanism really to deal with the problems of social media and their platforms, it is important for us as citizens of this country to be more responsible and be better citizens as a whole. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.